right. So I guess as the others come in, we'll be able to let them join and they can catch up in the process. All right. So again, our webinar today is on retail industry, resilience after natural disasters in e-commerce. My name is Vishal Ramnarayan. I'm the Vice President of Operations, Sales, and Marketing for Optimus Business Transformation. And in the words of our founder and CEO, our goal is to transform your business to thrive in a new digital economy. And we do this by the three P's: price, place, and product. Right? So using that, before we move forward, Optimus presents workshops almost every day of the week and every week of the month. So there is always a webinar that's up and running that is relevant and is provided just for you, right? So if you click on this link, you can go to our website, which is right here. And under the training tab, you'd see all of our trainings for this month and the next month that will come. And all you have to do is to click on one, for example, and you'd get the event details, the agenda, the time, the location. Obviously, it's going to be a Zoom webinar, and the speaker, right? Then you'd be able to register and you can add it to your calendar. All right, so that's simple enough. Okay, so let's go again. All right. All right, so this is one of my favorite videos. So in a simple word, Optimus is your trusted advisor. We use artificial intelligence and unified commerce um, as a foundation for your journey, right? Optimus utilizes AI to help you increase your sales, expand your markets, and improve productivity. We focus on various verticals, which include food and beverage, retail, consumer packaged goods, hospitality, financial services. Um, Amongst those, we also have grocery. Optimus has accomplished a lot over 2020 and 2021, 2022. We are gold partner with Microsoft. We have Power BI black belts on our staff also. And we've created strategic alliances with Groceify, Oracle, Microsoft. We've also developed some IPs, some of our own IPs for work from home and software solutions, which helped during the pandemic. Optimus has expanded. I think we have just over 15 to 17 offices throughout the Western Hemisphere. And we utilize the business process optimization methodology combined with mobility, ERP, WMS, business intelligence in order to help you improve your business processes. We even have e-pharmacy, property management systems and solutions. And Optimus, being your trusted advisor, means that we're there for you at any point in time, all the time. So be Optimus and be the leader, right? So we're going to move on to some fun facts now in our next video, all right? Within this video, we can see that we have 7.8 billion people in 2021. And as per the world population and the subscription to the various, whether it be a country, whether it be a platform, the number one is Facebook. Most subscribers as compared to the world population. You see WhatsApp is number 4. China is number 5. And surprise, surprise, Amazon is number 10. I thought Amazon was going to be higher, of course. With digital transformation, we've seen that the world's largest taxi company owns no vehicles. That's Uber, right? Facebook has the world's most popular media owner, but they have no content of their own, right? Airbnb, the world's largest accommodation provider, but they own no real estate, right? Retailer, but has no inventory. Everybody thought it was going to be Amazon, right? Right. The rate of change. The telephone took 75 years to reach 50 million users. However, Facebook took 3.5 years and Angry Birds just 35 days. Right? 35 days. Think about it. Yeah. Nobody for the past 10 years, I believe, knows what a payphone is. Right? Now, you just pick up your mobile and you text, you call, whatever it is. Before we used to go to the library. Now you pick up your tablet or your phone and the world's information is in your hands. Right? Live streaming, books. Before we used to actually watch TV, television, the big screen thing, television, right? Yeah. Now, pull out your cell phone, you pull out a tablet and you live streaming. You can stream any show you want. Before you had a first real life pet. Now, last year actually, my first robot pet. It was actually sold out in December. Before we started going to the banks to deposit your first paycheck, our CEO actually deposited his first Bitcoin last year as payment. Yeah. Um, we have to understand that our mega trends are shaping our future on a digital transformation. Now, 1 billion times more powerful cell phones in 30 years. Right? Think about it. We have a professional camera on our phone. Over 50% of the world population is under 30 years. 50%. Right? So let's just think about the world population 50-50, right? 8% of our mobile consumption is video. We look at videos for almost everything now. 2 in 3 people get their news from social media. Hashtag fake, is it real or is it not? Right? Today's college students have never licked postage stamp. Some people don't even know what a stamp is. And this has contributed to the shrinking attention spans. A goldfish is 8 seconds and a human is 7 seconds. More people own a cell phone or a mobile device than a toothbrush, right? 1 billion hours of video has been on YouTube and being consumed every day. YouTube is the second largest search engine behind Google. Google owns YouTube. 100 million job applications are posted on LinkedIn every month, right? Social media has overtaken porn as the number one activity on the web. More people spend more time on social media. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. 1 out of 8 couples married in the US in the last year met via social media. And if you were paid $1 for every time an article was posted on Wikipedia, you would earn approximately 1700 US. Eric Coleman, or better known as Equalman, said it right. We don't have a choice on whether we digitally transform or not, but it's how best we choose to do that, right? The question you need to ask yourself is, if you're in a position to digitally transform, if you're on that train, and if you're moving along with that train, if you're holding it back, or if you're on board and moving forward, right? And Optimus can definitely assist you with that. Now, I think it's enough talking that I've done so far, and a lot of talking, a lot of quick talking, right? So we're going to move on now to our primary speaker for today, who is Mr. Yamile Morales, the founder of Gopanza LLC. Varied amount of intelligence, of experience, within the market itself. And Yamile is going to give you guys, a good view of how to recover, all about, recovery after, natural disasters. So without further ado, Yamile, I'm going to hand over to you. So can you hear us? And I'm going to stop sharing. Yamile?
Unmute. Hello, can you hear me?
We're hearing you now.
All right, let me share my screen. Thanks for the intro. Let me know as soon as you can see my PowerPoint presentation.
Sure. Yes, I see you.
All right, Vishal, thank you very much for the intro. It's always refreshing to see your intro and the numbers of impact around the world. Today, first of all, thank you for having me. I'll be able to share something which is quite dear to us in Gopanza, because this is not the first time we've talked about resiliency and how not only our company but our software has been built around being resilient and actually helping our customers be resilient in a different situations that have happened in Puerto Rico, where we were born out of initially. So I'll try to do this as a non-technical presentation, and that's what I've tried with my slides, just to tell the story of us, of our software, and how we are currently and helping our customers and have been helping our customers to get out of a specific situation or to cater to consumers based on the different things that have been happening around the world and specifically in Puerto Rico. So a little bit about us. We were for a very small time focused on the food delivery business back in 2017. That's where our initial niche was, or our company was focused, our platform was focused. Around the world, we had seen that there was a very interesting need for for food delivery and logistics software. It was booming in South America, a lot of it in Europe, and there companies were taking over other companies, sort of similar to internet companies in the 2000s. It was something similar what was happening around since around 2014, 2015. And we thought that putting out a platform that will help and support companies that actually wanted to do that efficiently, um, talking about getting people stuff they wanted, in this case food, in a fast manner, in an efficient manner, was a challenge. And we put our efforts to it, and that we did. But at this site says the part of the story that we like to tell is that we didn't last more than 6 or 7 months dedicated to actual food delivery from restaurants, which was what was considered convenience at the time, um, because of certain factors and disasters that happened in Puerto Rico, and that's part of the story. What we do in essence in Gopansa with our Grossified e-commerce platform is we have a different approach from what's known around the world, like Instacart, which are apps that actually let other businesses go into their app and sell. So from the first time out, we focused on providing our customers, our future customers, be it restaurants at the time, but nowadays supermarkets, empowering them with a platform that helps them use their own brand to sell. And that has been our focus since day one and still is. And that's what we do. So we've grown as a platform. We started out with simple pickup and enabling pickup and delivery services, which were a convenience play way back 5 years ago. But today they've changed, and we've developed more technology for logistics, for inventory management, based on the different amounts of challenges which we found in our customers. And that's what we do today in a nutshell, right? So when we see the timeline, and we focus not on technology, but what has happened in Puerto Rico based on disasters, I must mention a few that probably some of you are not familiar with. But in Puerto Rico, we had a huge financial crisis. This was compounded after the 2008 crisis that hit US. Puerto Rico it has a direct relationship in terms of economy. I mention it because in Puerto Rico, it deepened in a sense that for the first time, the country was not able to do its own budget, to cover its own expenses. And there were a lot of issues, and uncertainty was prevailing in the country. And this obviously has an impact on the economy of the country, how many people keep living in the country, how many people keep wanting to work in a country that is in a very deep and financial crisis. And we started to get aid from the United States to sort of fix that. As of 2020, we were finally noticed that we're no longer in that financial crisis state, which is positive, but there's some more things that added on through the years that extended the amount of time that we would be in that crisis, which some of us consider that we're still in. Added to the financial crisis, which was imposed by humans living in Puerto Rico, there were the natural disasters such as Hurricane Maria. Hurricane Maria it was a very large hurricane. It was the biggest hurricane in 100 years for Puerto Rico, meaning that our current generations were prepared for the disaster that it came in terms of floods, in terms of everything it caused in Puerto Rico. I'll be talking a little bit of that and focusing on the impact on the supermarket area and e-commerce eventually, which was nascent, or it was growing in that year. And again, we were a company that had launched in April 2017, so this was like our welcoming on that year. Um, I'll talk a little bit about that. But also in Puerto Rico in 2019, we had a very interesting situation where the for the first time the governor was forced to quit by the people. That again destabilizes the economy, destabilizes the people in the country, and the people wanting to live in a country where things like this are happening. That's not necessarily a natural disaster, but it affects because all of our businesses have a direct relationship of wanting to find people and to fill out jobs that need to be done, and you need to have the smartest and the brightest in the country, right? So even eventually, we also had in the start of 2020 earthquake situation. Again, this was not common for Puerto Rico, but in a specific area of the country, in the central south part of the country, it wasn't just a 6.8, a 6.4 earthquake that hit for the first time in Puerto Rico, but for 2 months and a half, we had earthquakes pretty much every day in a smaller scale, right? But it was consistent, it was recurring, and it caused a lot of people moving from areas of specific areas of the island, and again, it brought a little bit of destabilization in the south part of the country. And finally, something that we're all in the call have lived, must understand, is the COVID-19 hit us that same year in Puerto Rico. It's been with us. I can't say that it has left us. I think it is here to stay, but in a different manner. So that's a zoom out of what specifically we've been living as a company, and with our customers have been helping in terms of overcoming challenges, right? And I'll zoom in into specifically three of them. Hurricane Maria, which arrived in Puerto Rico September 2017. To the right, you see Puerto Rico seen from above, seen from a satellite in terms of power overnight. So the first thing that we lived in Puerto Rico was that there was a huge power outage. At some point, it was reported that there was no power in 100% of the island. A few days later, because of the generators, the gas powered generators that we've been buying throughout the years due to smaller hurricanes, some of the people were able to get power. But the numbers were like 97, 96% of the population didn't have consistent power sources, meaning that they had no power to refrigerate their food. They had no power to light up their houses at night. They had no power to transit the the streets, right? So it was a very complicated situation. It wasn't just in one side of the country, so it was pretty much across the board, which brought us a challenge to every business in Puerto Rico at that point. Not only there was a huge power outage, but there were many homes were destroyed. So there were a lot of people that were displaced. A lot of people were had to go to shelters to live for a while there was a lot of support coming into the country. Obviously, many businesses were left inoperable. Specifically, in our business at the time, which we were supporting restaurants, we had a huge learning in terms of restaurants had no access to gasoline to power their plants. Restaurants have no access to food to serve their customers. Restaurants had a great challenge in terms of getting their businesses up. So pretty much most of the restaurants we worked with, which at the time were like 25 to 30 in a specific region of the country, had no way of opening up. So if you come to look at it, us serving that community of businesses, we were pretty much shut down for a while, which caused us to reinvent ourselves and focus on other areas which were important at the time. I must mention that not only power outage, but satellite communications for internet and or even wired communication for internet were very limited at the time. So communicating with your family across the island, or even if you were outside of Puerto Rico, was a challenge. And in general, access to food was complicated. If you did have gasoline to get on a car, the transiting the roads was a challenge. Not all businesses were selling. They themselves had no power to be able to maintain food in a fresh manner. So it was a very disconcerting scenario, right, for everyone. But at the end, there was a lot of help coming into the country. Fortunately, right, from US, from many countries at the time. And something interesting we learned was the supermarkets were the priority in the country, meaning supermarkets had access firsthand to gas to power their plants. All food, or let's look at it this way, the government was relying strongly on supermarkets to be able to distribute the food, be it via the physical food or what we know as EBT or the benefits, economic benefits for food or food stamps in the US. They were strategically aligned with the government to be able to be the channels to distribute food because they couldn't rely on the smaller stores or the smaller businesses to be able to help them. And there was an urgent situation. At the time, we had considered for a while pivoting into supermarkets. Looking at the current scenario when Maria hit, it was a definite yes, and we got approached by the biggest supermarket in Puerto Rico, which has coverage along 100% of the island. I would say probably 90% of the island, and we were able in 2 months to pivot our technology from serving restaurants to serve supermarkets with all the implications and all the differences in terms of the amount of SKUs, the amount of customers they managed in a day, right? So it was super interesting for us as a company to have that opportunity, to have the biggest retailer in the country come to us and ask us for help. Us being a four-employee company with a lot of dreams, no big dreams to make our technology very efficient for everybody, as it had been for restaurants at some point. But still, we had the challenges we had mentioned, right? Internet was not readily available. So if you were thinking about e-commerce, you were thinking about hyper local scenarios for people that actually had access to applications, access to website to be able to order the food. Since people didn't have access to transportation, then it was interesting because all of a sudden, from us being a company that offered delivery services to our customers, we turned around and offered that as a service to our retailers, meaning specifically that supermarkets for the first time, in at least in Puerto Rico, were looking to buy more vehicles to be able to service their customers, right? Customers weren't walking in necessarily to their stores as it was normal at that time. Another aspect that was interesting, since there was low power, then distribution of food was limited to the day, right? Only if you could see where you're going, you could deliver to the right point or to the people that actually order the food. EBT at the time was super, super relevant. Food stamps. People, even banks weren't open to get cash out, so you could purchase. Not all stores had internet to process digital transactions. So food stamps was being a local network in Puerto Rico. Kind of saved the day for many people, being able to feed them. Um, and something interesting we came across when we started in December 17th, we took 60 days or 70 days to be able to pivot our technology. We started with the first with the first supermarket, servicing the first supermarket in one of the most affected areas of the country in the east, right? One of the cities. Uh, to 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 share our experiences. The first delivery we did was very challenging, not only because we didn't know where the people lived, right, or the internet was, going back and forth, but there were no signs of in the road, so the names of streets weren't clear to everybody that was delivering. But something interesting we came across that surprised us was that for every four purchases coming into our system, one was being made by a relative in the US, right? So it was super comforting that we had people feeding their families from afar, where they did have the resources to be able to have time to select the food, to provide for the relatives in Puerto Rico. The truth of the matter is that the status quo for those 2 or 3 months later on became the status quo for 2 or 3 years, because still today the reconstruction plan is going. There's areas, I sadly could say that there are areas in Puerto Rico that still don't have power that like they should. It's a very frail system. But again, the story is about how we overcame this. So some of the stuff we started looking at is solving how to get people food to the house, right, to their houses, and how to be able to help them. So so our first approach was building pickup lanes. So this was, at least in the US, not seen up to the point. Pickup lanes were a solution for actually not necessarily having people to have to go inside a store. You must imagine that at a time where there was no power, and in their houses, anybody that could get transportation to a supermarket would stay in a supermarket probably 4 hours, because there was air conditioner, there was a deli where they could eat, have breakfast, and thinking about the situation, well, as a consumer, it was very comforting to find a place. For a retailer, it was very challenging, because you don't necessarily want consumers to be living inside your store, and that was the situation at the time. So pickup lanes were a solution not only for customers to be able to pick up their groceries and in a fast way, and not having to step into to the um, to the stores, but by using QR code technology, it was pretty efficient that we limited the lines of cars at the time, and also it served the different delivery vans. So in this store that I'm showing, there were seven different lanes that at some point in time, all of them were full, right? So they were serving both the consumers and both the delivery staff that was going back and forth, so they could be faster, and they could maximize the time, the daylight during the day, right? Um, Something that we had to focus on, and Puerto Rico specifically, and this might be similar in other countries, is that um, addresses in Puerto Rico are repetitive, meaning that you might have the same street with the same name 20, 25 times, or at least once per every municipality. So when we analyzed that there was a lot of people ordering from the US, we had to invest in making sure that it was easy, it was straightforward, finding where exactly your relative lived, right? So to have their food delivered there. The risk of not having that is that since there was no power at the time, uh, easily a driver could come up to the wrong place or the wrong house and offer food, and not knowing if that was the family at the time that was expected to receive it. So investing in logistic technology and accurate mapping for the consumers was something, a huge investment that we did, and solved a lot of issues in not only that, but making sure that routing at the time, that taking the roads that were actually operable, that that were transitable, making sure that you would maximize. At the time, it was interesting because there was not a lot of cars on the street, right? Not a lot of people, but there was a lot of debris in the street, which made it a little more complex navigating into even to close places around stores. And another thing we learned is that there was the amount of food that people were ordering were huge. So from average purchases of $40 to $50 in store, when we started the e-commerce, we were starting to get $400, $500 purchases or orders. And when we looked at it and when we talked to consumers, it was very driven by the fact that they didn't know when was the next time they were going to purchase, right? So they had, in terms of canned foods and all the groceries that they could have, they bought as much as they could, afraid of not being able to go back to the store. So that was interesting in a consumer's perspective, but it brought challenges to the store. It definitely created another issues like where are we going to store of many $400 orders. So space was a challenge in store. So something that helped us at the time was making sure that there was a very good routing optimization inside the store. So picking was fast, packing was faster, and we could get as much orders out of the store as fast as possible. And last but not least is optimizing the usage of bandwidth. At the time, some stores were relying on very little bandwidth for operating the whole store. So we did some investment in our technology to make sure that we weren't hogging the bandwidth, and that any store in any part of the country could run their e-commerce in a optimized way. So later on, Maria affected Puerto Rico. I think we're still living some of the effects of it. But 2 years after or 3 years after, we had reconstructed a greater part of the country. Something strange came to happen to us, which was earthquakes. For that, we were less prepared, right? That's not common in Puerto Rico. And the fact that it wasn't just only one, it was a lot of tremors or earthquakes on a daily basis, brought a different scenario. So stores were now destroyed, right? And there was store owners didn't want to fix their stores because they were waiting on insurance, right? And even if they did, they were afraid that stores in the region would eventually shake again, and all the products were damaged. So this brought some very interesting scenarios. So not only store owners didn't want to open to consumers because of the risk that it posed having consumers in the aisles, right? So merchandising changed in a way. So some retailers stopped taking products out of the boxes, and they started shopping from or picking from their own stores, but from the big boxes. Some of them from their in-store warehouses, right? And still at the time, it was easy to find employees in Puerto Rico. We know that that's not the case right now. I think it's a worldwide, right? But the options or the solution at the time were actually having the dark store approach, meaning that they would shop from their own stores. There weren't any consumers, and in terms of logistics, something also that we saw that was that stores that were not necessarily close or nearby to consumers started supporting or giving services. So we had to look at a different scenario. There was the south part of the island was devastated. stores were devastated. So now retailers around the area around the borderline non-affected areas wanted to serve those customers. So again, we packed our stuff. We went into technology. We looked at routing. We looked at zoning. We looked at revamping our technology to optimize different store owners than traditional, giving services to those consumers. And at the time, um, when we interviewed consumers, this time around, consumers not only were afraid to live under their own roof, right? But many have moved to shelters. So instead of delivering to their homes, we were delivering to temporary locations where they are. So making sure that food got there at the specific time they ordered, and making sure that there was no confusion in the service was a focus of our technology. And for the first time, we saw collaboration between different retailers. So at the time, there was a lot of assistance coming to Puerto Rico. Our technology for the first time was used to distribute food that wasn't necessarily purchased by consumers, meaning they could put inventory in our app, and if you had certain certain specific voucher or certain specific attributes, you could actually order from our platform and receive our food in a humanitarian approach, right? Making sure that everybody had food. uh, Again, buying fresh fruit was a challenge because now people in that region didn't have they had power, but their homes were destroyed. So again, it was a different scenario for us and for retailers. So we had to quickly understand and analyze what was the cornerstone food that people needed and could have. And in also in this time, we saw that deliveries went back to being smaller. At the time, we guessed that it was because they have no space. That they have no space to store more food, but that was the case in many other areas. And when we again interviewed, it was the challenges that we're having. Not everybody lost their homes, but most of the people didn't want to be there. Um, so when we turned around to the retailer and to offer a solution, that's the first time we started talking about dark stores, as I mentioned. So dark stores approach are using your existing store without consumers inside of it to actually maximize storage space. So we had retailers using actual lanes and actual aisles for storing delivery orders. So part of their stores were being used like a warehouse, which was interesting for us. We got approached by at least three retailers that closed half of their stores and use their spaces for delivery and pick up orders that consumers were placing. Definitely, a factor that came in that was interesting and made our platform grow was that all of a sudden there were different payment options that wanted to or providers that want to help. Something that made the difference in Puerto Rico was healthcare providers. All of a sudden, healthcare providers were approved to cover food or basic necessity food for their lives that they cover, right? For the people that have their plans. So that's something we integrated quickly into our platform. So meaning that now you can use your healthcare plan to get food. And that's just an example of some of the alternate payments that we were able to put very rapidly to support the people that were having their challenges in at that point. Um, as I mentioned, there was space at orders were increasing. Space was a challenge, and Um, some store even started using carts as locations. So I'll explain this just to visualize. So when they ran out of spaces to store their orders, they just picked inside of carts and left the carts, and carts were actually considered a location or a place where somebody's order was waiting. So again, we had to come visit our technology and imagine how we can solve issues at the time that were pretty urgent for those 3 months, 4 months, but we're solving issues that were eventually, as we'll see in COVID scenario, uh, we're solving even future issues. So the last disaster that we went through in Puerto Rico, it's a worldwide disaster. It's COVID-19. Specifics about this time around in March 2020 and on was that the supply chain was affected greatly, and now some of the canned products that you would have bought in the past during earthquakes or during Maria were not available. We learned that this was because labels weren't being able to be printed. So again, this speaks about the type of food that people were buying was again different, right? So now you couldn't get some food that you usually were accustomed to buy, and this had an impact on the local production, which was positive, right? For the first time, we saw that customers were exploring; they were taking more time to look at local options because local farmers were producing and they had the availability of products, right? Supply chain was in Puerto Rico. We import about 96-98% of the food, which is a challenge for us. So when that was affected by the different factors, so local production was highlighted. Um, at the time, many of 4 years after or 3 years after, there were many companies that were offering logistics services, which was interesting to us, and they did comply in a sense with COVID regulations or making people feel safe. It was a single person taking food from place A to place B. So many retailers asked us to be able to integrate these different providers to their platform, and that's something we did. Today, we have customers that have multiple distribution channels, meaning they have different companies servicing the distribution channel of having deliveries, food delivered to their customers. And another factor that we saw increase at the time, which was mobile adoption, the use of mobile apps for ordering online. Um, we've we've heard, everybody here has probably heard that adoption of technology during COVID was they 3 times what they expected in every year, meaning that a lot of people took to technology. As we see it in our business, was what turned out to be convenience at the beginning of those 5 years turned into a necessity. So people of all ages were going to shop online, and we outright lived that in a very short space of time. And again, that was a challenge to our platform. It was a challenge uh, to even be able to serve so many people that now were found that were constrained to their homes. Other factors that did affect the platform and required us to again look at our technology and see where we can find optimization was the scarcity of employees, right? So now what we're hearing from retailers is that I don't have as many people to serve the amount of orders. So the scenario is pretty much everyone is trying to buy online, and we have limited amount of people, be it because they no longer want to risk their own lives to serve shoppers. For whatever reason, there was an uneven balance on orders versus people that could fulfill those orders in store, right? Uh, Again, people didn't want to go to store because they didn't want to stack up next to people. Interestingly enough, again, the patterns of purchasing changed. People were spending more time on the apps, I guess because they had more time. They were in their house constrained, and they were exploring different categories of food, and that was interesting to us because products that weren't being sold online all of a sudden were being sought after, and as I mentioned, many of those being local. Um, we all lived through the new health protocols that were required, so we had to make sure that we have validation along the technology to make sure that we comply with that, with government imposed regulations, and we were able to incorporate more technology from third party providers or third party logistic providers. I was able to capture, at least for one of our customers and one of our channels, the increase of how many people were buying. And as you can see, from an average of 1,000 people that were buying or tried to buy in a specific week, we went to 52,000 people overnight. That happened in March. Um, Again, that was testing our technology, testing how many how many people we could serve, and this brought not only challenges in technology but in the stores that were serving them. The scenario was that all of a sudden we've reached the top of our limits, or stores had reached the top of their limits, meaning they didn't have enough employees, they didn't have enough bandwidth in terms of labor to be able to fulfill the orders that everybody had. And again, the size of the orders was big. So what we did in terms of technology was enable mobile picking. So so instead of having a tablet going around in the cart as you see, we enabled every employee to be able to pick from their own phone. This removed bottlenecks in terms of being able to pick only one order per tablet per session. Another improvement that we borrowed from warehouse practices was batch picking. Batch picking speaks about being able to gather more than one order at the time. We quickly did that and were able to have a single employee picking at an average of 3 orders at the same time, which open up opportunities, right? And flexi put a little flexibility on how many employees you needed to fulfill a specific amount of orders. And definitely time slots for us were new. Before we operated with, you could ask for a specific lot in time with no limits, no needing to be in place. Based on our experience, there was around 29,000 people lined up at midnight when those new slots were opening to order. So we had to definitely implement new technology to have limits in a per store per hour. That was new to us. That this technology was later used to actually limit the lines, the physical lines in stores. And so it was a great experience to us, but again, forced by the challenges that we're living. And something that we used a lot was dynamic departments. So dynamic departments were used to let store owners create specific departments with specific products to highlight those products and make sure that people were discovering the products that were available. And now that people wanted to do more elaborate meals, be able to show them what was available. So last but not least, in terms of technology, we launched our self-checkout technology. Contactless was definitely the way to go, and people's preferred it. They still do, right? Not necessarily having to contact many people during your process when you go to the store. We're seeing people go back to the stores, but we're also seeing people stick to buying online and shopping from different retailers. So self checkout is something that we implemented as a whole new technology based on the core that we already had. Um, in summary and looking forward, I think disasters will always come in different manners. We're living some of the effects of global things, and every day that passes, we're impacted by things that not happening near us. For example, gas prices are going up. That has a direct impact on delivery providers, right, and delivery options. Um, Consumers, we've seen that consumers are buying from different retailers because of the technology they have available. They want a more digital experience. Mobile app shopping has come to stay. 98% of our purchases go through a mobile app, meaning that that's the preferred option. So that's something we have to consider to empower the retailers we serve. And definitely consumers are spending more time or they're doing their shopping. So we have captured their interest and can offer different experiences based on the time they're willing to spend, which was very little 5 years ago. And another two factors that we talk about is that brands budgets are all of a sudden more geared to digital experiences. So that's a factor that is helping out retailers invest and take steps toward making their experiences more digital, offering e-commerce, etc., etc. And last but not least, loyalty programs are coming into play because people have bought online so much that they're starting to leverage that information that retailers have and to buy quicker and loyalty will take a very important role in making them buy again from the specific retailer that they're buying currently. So, as in summary, our platform has constantly been challenged, and we have to adapt to real life scenarios that affect, in some cases, only Puerto Rico, but in the rest of the cases, the whole world. And we're always accommodating to consumer needs. We've been able to do that for 4 years in a row. Our platform has been selected as the number one platform in Puerto Rico to buy online food online. And the truth is that we've been able to do that without creating great complications or pivots in strategy for retailers. It's pretty much transparent. Our commitment is to continue to be able to provide more and more solutions in the e-commerce space, specifically for groceries. And we're now moving on to food retailers, but we're sticking to food. And that's part of our strategy and our strategy looking forward. Again, thanks for your time. I think we're more or less on time. I again thank you, Optimus, for allowing us to share our experiences. As you can see, our technology is a reflection of what we've lived, but it's empowered many of our customers to be able to overcome challenges that otherwise would have been challenging, right? To overcome. And again, thanks for your time. I'm open to questions if there are any at the time.